ES Audio. From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Rachel Abbott, and this is The Leader. Today we're giving you some bonus content taken from our business show, How to Be a CEO. An opportunity to hear from the most powerful people behind some of the world's biggest brands. This is a cut-down version of the full episode. To hear the full thing, hit the link in the show notes. Find a new episode of How to Be a CEO every Monday morning, and why not give it a rate and follow whilst you're there? Now, let's begin.
Hello, I'm David Marsland, and this edition of How to Be a CEO was recorded live in front of an audience at the Evening Standard's SME Expo at the end of May. I spoke to Euan Blair. Yes, he's Tony's son, but he's also an extremely successful entrepreneur. The founder and CEO of Multiverse, he's built that company into a multinational giant valued last September at $875 million. It offers apprenticeships as an alternative to university, and it's working with huge names like Morgan Stanley, Microsoft, and Google. This is not your father's apprenticeship. These are in areas like data analysis and software engineering, jobs that might be seen as requiring a degree, but should they?
So Euan, like I said, I don't have a degree. You do. In fact, you've got two, I think. Yes, but here we are. We're in the same place. We're in front of the same audience. Same people are out there. To be fair, your name's on the poster and mine's not. Nobody's here to see me, which is very sad. But we are exactly in the same moment of time right now. Did you need a degree to be here?
That question is something I've reflected on a lot. Yes, probably, because the graduate scheme I joined was called a graduate scheme. You needed a degree to join it at Morgan Stanley. And it was one of those things that almost immediately struck me, right? I did an undergraduate in ancient history, I did a master's in international relations, and then I was working on a graduate scheme in investment banking, where those two degrees were absolutely useless in the workplace setting for the job I was trying to do, right? Understanding financial markets, I was doing corporate debt and derivatives, advising UK companies on how to approach fundraising and how to approach hedging. And it was odd to me that when you looked around the group on that graduate scheme, and it was quite stark, right? We were nearly all white, pretty much all men, all from the same small handful of universities. And none of us had any divine right to be there. And there are people with geography degrees, history of art degrees, philosophy degrees. It was a consequence of an obsession with this credential that assumed it conferred something upon you that meant you were more likely to be successful in a job. Now, the fact is, and as I've seen since then, there's no correlation between academics and job performance. But this degree credential has still been used as a filtering mechanism. And actually, when you really boil it down, essentially, we've allowed the top jobs in the labour market and who takes those top jobs to be determined by a small group of academic institutions. And that's hugely problematic for society. It has helped embed inequality into the labour market. So there are very good reasons why when only 4% of people claiming free school meals go to a Russell Group university, therefore we should not be surprised when social mobility is poor in tech and professional services. Likewise, minority groups are consistently underrepresented, and most tech courses at universities are filled with white men. So these are all problems, and they're even more stark when you think about the fact the world is changing so rapidly. The pandemic has accelerated all of that change. And yet, if you walk onto a university campus, you basically see the same thing you saw in the 1960s. So there's been very little development.
Yeah, I did look at some figures, and I saw that 75% of people starting undergraduate degrees are white. So if there's a diversity problem in the workforce, which we know that there is that starting then right at the very beginning with education?
It's absolutely a part of it. And actually, by the way, I think there were something like 117 black professors out of a faculty of maybe 15 to 20,000, right? So just at every level, there is a lack of representation, and this creates real problems. So that is absolutely part of it. But it's incumbent on all of us to say, why do we not provide choice to people when they are leaving school? That you have an academic route for people who want to study in an esoteric academic environment and have identified a subject they think they'll enjoy, and an applied learning, more practical problem-solving focused route for people who have a sense of what job they want to do and want to learn in the workforce. And a lot of our time and effort has been spent on ensuring that applied route is as well understood and as prestigious as the non-applied route. And it's much easier to do that when we can say today, partly thanks to the success we've had, you can be an apprentice without a degree now at Google, at Facebook, at Unilever, at Clifford Chance, at Morgan Stanley. And very quickly that starts to filter down to schools and parents.
But isn't this going to have to take a bit of a cultural shift? Or maybe that's happening right now. I mean, you started Multiverse not that long ago. You clearly had success in persuading the companies to take this on board. How hard, though, is it to, I guess, change the culture to let young people... I accept that you work with people throughout their career, but in that initial stage to accept young people, in my case, my parents, it would have been, you're doing an apprenticeship. How are you kind of changing that culture, this idea that university is the best route to get a high-paying job?
I think in the end it comes down to the employers, the job opportunities on offer, and what outcomes look like. And so we spend a lot of time collecting data around that. As an example, 90% of the apprentices that we place stay long-term with their employers. About 60% get a promotion or pay increase while they're on program. They stay twice as long in their first job as graduates. So all of those things are pretty important. I remember... probably back in 2020, one of our apprentices wrote a piece saying, how do we get apprenticeships to pass the middle class dinner party test, right? Basically, if you've got a group of well-to-do parents sat around a table, they're talking about what their kids are doing, and someone's bragging, my child's got a place at Oxford, mine's going to Bristol, whatever it might be, and then someone says, my kid's doing an apprenticeship, and everyone sort of is stunned into silence. That's a real issue. And actually, when you speak to parents, and we spend a lot of time doing outreach with parents and schools and teachers, they care about, what does this mean for my child's life prospects, right? What kind of job can they get into? So the minute you break that assumed link between the jobs and the mechanism or the route, right, it becomes much, much easier. And you have to take that message to different communities. We've had, for example, I remember one of our proudest moments, we have an elected president of our apprentice community. And she went and addressed a group of Muslim mums at the local mosque. There were several hundred of them. And they all said, look, our aspiration has always been for our children to go to university. Why should we not be focusing on that? And she explained very clearly her personal experience, the job she was doing now at Facebook, the salary she was earning. And they were absolutely delighted.
So is it a company that approaches you or an individual that approaches you about doing apprenticeships? How does that work? How do you work with industry?
So it's a combination of the two things. And typically we start with the employer because in the end an apprenticeship is a job. It is full-time employment alongside full-time education. And so we will work with companies to have a look at where they can benefit from apprenticeships, what the use case is, what business pain they can solve. We'll work a lot as well with people on the diversity, equity, and inclusion side because every company is focused on how they better now represent their customers. This is something that's gone from being an issue that was sort of outsourced to a small DEI function to now something that is a board level issue and a CEO level issue, and startups and SMEs are increasingly focused on it from the earliest stages. And then we spend a lot of time doing engagement with schools, doing marketing campaigns. We get a huge amount of organic traffic from TikTok actually, which any SME or startup looking to increase their presence digitally should be exploring that. We do a bit on Instagram, on Snapchat, and we work with lots of charitable organizations and partnerships.
And you're creating a £30 million pot effectively for companies to come to and ask for funding for apprenticeships. Right. What are you doing with that? 5,000 over the next 12 months?
Correct. That's the idea, to get 5,000 apprenticeships. That is squarely aimed at small and medium-sized enterprises because typically they don't necessarily have the financial wherewithal to pay for the cost of that training. So this will fully cover the cost of the training of those individuals. It's being sponsored by companies like Deloitte, like Amazon, and many others. And they will ensure that so long as you find an apprentice that you want to either take on or reskill within your organization, the costs of that training will be fully covered.
And that's going to create, I expect you'll be hoping, the start of a new generation of people coming in who, I guess I wonder, we talked about that snobbery of the university. Is this about wiping that out? It's okay to not go to university?
It's partly about doing that, for sure, because that is absolutely a battle that we face, and we just expanded into the US last year. We're delivering in 9 cities in America now, and in America 75% of the population go to college versus about 50% here who go to university, so it's even more deeply ingrained. We're constantly doing that and sort of exploring that advocacy. The thing that helps is when you can say to an individual, you get the job you want, with the skills you need in an area you care about, you get one-on-one coaching, you're paid a salary, and you're not accumulating any debt. It's such a compelling proposition, and I think that massively helps. And then you have to unpick all the structural imbalances and kind of the ways of thinking that are currently embedded on this. But it's a sort of, you're addressing the two issues in tandem.
That was Euan Blair, the founder and CEO of Multiverse. For all the latest business news, analysis and advice, check out our business pages in the Evening Standard newspaper or go online to standard.co.uk. How to Be a CEO is released first thing every Monday morning. Hit your follow button and join us next week.